In this video, I'm going to go over the basics of cleaning a window in a residential setting. I'm going to start by going over my tool belt and what I carry with me. So first of all, I've got my tool belt on, and that's just your standard 3-pocket tool belt. And on there I have my bucket on a belt. This carries my strip washer, some water with it, and my squeegees. Keeps it all in a handy place. My strip washer, it's an 18-inch strip washer with a T-bar. I like the kind where the T-bar moves. This is handy for especially when you're outside on a ladder or if you're using a pole to be able to move that. The strip washer comes off of the T-bar, right, so you can interchange them and keep a fresh one on there and wash them when they get too ratty. Okay, and then I've got my squeegees. This is a 12-inch squeegee. This is an 18-inch squeegee. And then I'm carrying also an 8-inch squeegee with me over here. You could use an 8-inch or a 6-inch squeegee. You just want to have something smaller for when you run into those small windows on a door or in the bathroom or something like that. Okay, after that I've got my 5-in-1 or my painter's tool. This is for removing screens with when you're outside. This is my little scrubby toothbrush, little wire toothbrush. This is for cleaning out the tracks with, loosening all the debris before I vacuum it up if you were to clean the tracks. I've got my quadruple-aught steel wool. Remember, you don't want to use anything less than quadruple-aught because this is the only type that is fine enough that it won't scratch the glass. I've got my hand brush. Hand brush is for removing the debris like cobwebs, spider webs, things like that. Or if the window is really dusty and maybe it hasn't been cleaned in years, I would dust it off first with my hand brush, vacuum that up, and then proceed like normal. Okay, and then I've got my terry cloth. This is just a regular white shop rag or painter's rag, anything like that, that's just really absorbent cotton rag. And that is for wiping up the slop, any drips or anything like that that you drip on the windowsill or on the floor. That's what for this. And then I've got my surgical towel. This is for detailing the windows with. Surgical towel, a microfiber towel, or a chamois, which is a lambskin. Any of those will work for detailing. I prefer these surgical towels just because they last quite a while and they're pretty cheap and easy to wash. So that's what I use. Okay, and then last thing is my razor blade. I have a 6-inch razor blade. It's at an angle and it is extremely sharp, extremely dangerous, so you have to be careful of this all the time. Because of that, I have a holster that I've bought, so I have a little holster that goes in, keeps it safe, keeps it from cutting me or anyone else, and I have learned the hard way on that. Trust me, invest in a holster and be careful with it. Okay, all right, so next thing I'm going to go over is the water. So I've got my 5-gallon bucket here full of water. Typically this is something I would keep outside the home, but for this demonstration I've got it in here, and I'm going to show you just how much soap, how much detergent I put in it, which is not a lot. But I'm just using regular Dawn liquid detergent, and pay attention to how much I put in. I've got about 4 gallons of water in this bucket, and I'm going to put in about that much. So you need about an ounce of detergent for 4 gallons of water. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is, and I would usually, again, I would do this outside the home. I'm going to mix that around until it's all in a nice solution. It's not going to be too sudsy, just a little bit. Maybe a little bit of suds on there, just enough to know that there's some detergent in it. And I'm going to get my strip washer nice and wet. Put it in my bucket on a belt. Always look after yourself and make sure that you're not leaving drips on the customer's floor, which is always good to have a lot of these white towels handy. And then ordinarily I'd keep this bucket outside. I would need to revisit the bucket a couple of times during the job to re-wet my strip washer. When I'm on the inside of a home, I'm not going to be using a whole lot of water So it's okay to leave the bucket outside. Just have what's on your hip bucket with you. When you're on the outside of a home, you can use far more water, and it's you just carry the big bucket next to you. Okay, so now that we're ready to go, first thing I'm going to do before I get this window wet is I'm going to inspect it. I'm going to look it over. If there's cobwebs and dust, I'm going to take care of that with my hand brush. And supposing there's not, in this case, I'm going to then inspect the window, the perimeter of it. I'm going to look at the frame, make sure there's no cracks or warped sections or anything that's coming loose. And I'm going to look and see, does there look like there's moisture in between the pane? No. If there is, I'm going to bring that to the customer's attention before I touch it. Those are all pre-existing damage that has been done to the glass, and you do not want it being blamed on you. So you need to bring it to the customer's attention, let them know that cleaning it, introducing water to it, if there's a leaky seal, could create more moisture inside the pane. So it's a risk that they need to assume if you've advised them of that. But make sure that you talk to them about that first before you go ahead and get it wet. All right, so in this case, it's fine. The last thing I'm going to inspect it for is if there's a film. So is there any low E film or window tinting, anything like that on there? And especially if it's on the sunny side of a home, this is especially something you're going to be running into quite a bit. So the way I would test for that is I would just feel it with my fingers, kind of knock on it, scratch it with your fingernails a little bit. If there is a coating on there, if there's a film on there, it's going to feel plasticky and rubbery. It's not going to feel like that cold glass feeling and that kind of slippery glass feeling. The other way I can tell is I can just look at the color of it, and I can also inspect it for a little kind of a little seam here at the edge where they've installed it, or you can see maybe little blemishes or air bubbles where they've installed it as well. Really, it's not that hard to tell. It's just a matter of paying attention and checking for it before I get it wet. The reason I'm going to check for that is because my solution isn't going to hurt it, but what will is my steel wool or my razor. If there's film on the window, my steel wool will scratch it and my razor will cut it. So you do not want to be replacing window film on a customer's window. Okay, so make sure you check for that. All right, so I've checked. There's no film on there. Now I'm ready to get it wet. Okay, so I'm going to take my strip washer, wring it out on my hip bucket. I don't need a lot, like I said, on the inside of a home. And I'm going to get it wet. And what I want to do is I want to make sure I get from edge to edge. A lot of times people will just wet 2/3 of the middle of it and they'll forget the edges. You need the edges as much as the field to be nice and wet. And I'm going to kind of look at the glass as I'm getting it wet, and I'm going to look at the fingerprints that are on there and the dirt and the soil and everything else, and I'm going to kind of scrub it around until I see those kind of disappear and dissolve. Okay, so now that I've got it pretty well moistened edge to edge, okay, it's ready to go. Now, before I squeegee it, there's all kinds of things on here that my strip washer is not going to be able to get. Okay, so you probably can't see it in the video, but there are some little paint flecks here. So I'm going to use my razor to get those off. When I do that, I'm going to hold my razor like this. I'm going to put a finger kind of right here for pressure. All right, I'm not going to push too hard, but I'm going to be firm. I want firm contact with the glass. And I don't want to go all over the place with my razor. I want to go in nice, straight, uniform lines, and I want to go all the way until I hit the edge of the frame. Okay, so I'm going to start here, and I'm just going to move like so, and I don't want to use my razor on glass that's dry. So as you're using your razor, you're going to be pushing the water off. You're going to want to kind of only go where you still see water. Right, here's a little piece of tape right here. Sometimes that takes a little extra. And I'm only moving in 90-degree angles. Right, so either up and down or side to side, and only where it's wet. And so once I have that all scraped there, Now once I do that, I can't start squeegeeing it yet because it's not fully wet. So I'm going to have to get it wet again after I do that. Okay, so now it's all wet again, ready to go. The next thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to detail it with my steel wool. This may not always be necessary. Typically on the inside of a home, this isn't always necessary, but I'm going to do it for demonstration purposes. When on the outside of a home, it's almost always necessary because the hard mineral buildup in the air outdoors usually warrants scrubbing it with a steel wool. On the inside, sometimes you can get away with not having to do that. However, I'm going to do it just for good measure here. So same deal, I'm going to have firm pressure. I don't need to push very hard, but I do need to be firm. And with the steel wool, I just want to move in circular motions. And this is where I want to really make sure I'm getting all the way to the edge, because your strip washer has a hard time scrubbing on the very edges. All right, but I'm going to just give it a good scrub, and this is going to get all the teeny tiny little spots that are going to show up in the sunlight. All the little bug spots, all the tiny little just flecks of debris on the glass that your strip washer just wasn't quite tough enough to get off. It also works pretty well on fingerprints or dog nose prints or something like that. And you can see, I can see right here, there's still some dog nose prints that need a little extra work. And I can tell because the water is beating up and rolling away from where those spots are. So now that I've got that scrubbed with my steel wool, it's still wet enough. If it wasn't, I could get it wet again. Put some more solution on there. Okay, so now this is the basic way. I'll make another video where I'll show you the advanced way, but this is for the beginners. This is the beginner's way of squeegeeing a window. I want you to take your white terry cloth and I want you to go around the edges and wipe two edges of the glass, so top and side. Okay, and you're just going to wipe a dry spot right there. And then you're going to take your squeegee and you're going to start on one of those two edges. So I just did those two. I could start here and I could go from top to bottom. And I'm going to put my squeegee right up there and I'm going to drag it downward until I hit the next bottom, right? I'm going to pull it up, wipe it off, okay, and then move over. Now when I move over, I want to overlap my squeegee onto the dry part that I just squeegeed. I want to overlap that by about 1.5 inches. So I'm going to put my squeegee over into the dry part here, and then when I pull down, I'm going to tilt the dry side of my squeegee into the dry side of the glass. I'm going to tilt it in there, which is going to make all of the water funnel towards the wet side of the glass. The reason I'm going to do that is so that I don't leave a big line, a big streak of water here. I want to push all the water towards one side. Okay, and then finally, I'm going to do that on this other side. And that's the basic way you can do it. And I'm going to show you that again, but I'm going to go side to side this time instead of from top to bottom. A lot of times that's going to be a little bit easier. Okay, so again, I'm going to take my white towel. I'm going to wipe along the edges. Okay, and I'll show you with the smaller squeegee. And then I'm going to go up here. I want to make sure I get all the way into that edge, so I'm going to tilt my squeegee in until the blade hits the very edge of the window. And again, I'm going to overlap it up into the dry part, and I'm going to, when I start dragging it, I'm going to tilt my squeegee like this, so I'm pushing all that water, channeling all that water towards the wet side of the glass, away from the dry side. I don't want a big line of water going across. So tilt it like that. Maybe I'll show you what happens if you don't tilt it. If I don't tilt it, I don't know if you can see or not, but there's a big line there because it didn't push the water at an angle. Right? And that's okay. I can correct that simply by just doing this, and then again to the bottom. Okay, now we're not quite done. First thing I need to do is, with my white towel, clean up the sill. I don't want to leave drips all over the place. And I want to wipe up the track, because I don't want to leave drips all over the place in there either. And once that's clean, then I'm going to take my detailing cloth, so in this case my surgical towel, and I'm going to look and make sure I didn't leave any streaks or lines of water. If I did, and it's a small amount, use my towel to get it really quick. If I left too many, I would suggest just getting the window wet and squeegeeing it over again. But in this case I didn't, and so I'm going to then just wipe up the edges. And all I'm doing is I'm putting my index finger into my towel and creating a nice little point on a dry spot. Find a dry spot, and you're going to wipe those edges. And if it gets wet, you got to kind of move your finger and get another dry spot for each edge. And I'm just drying up, detailing the glass. Okay? Now it's set. Now it's done. All right, in the next video, I will show you the way that you'll want it to be able to swirl your squeegee. That's a more advanced technique. But this is a way you can always clean any window. You can use this technique with a pole if we're doing a large window. You can always rely on this. You can teach this technique very easily to anybody who's helping you. It's called the straight pull technique.